I've seen so many people rush out and buy a cheap, single-door mini fridge to put on the patio, only to find it sweats, sputters, and finally gives up the ghost when the summer heat climbs past 90 degrees F. The regret is real. You end up with a lukewarm drink, a busted unit, and a dent in your budget. That's why I wanted to see if the NewAir 24-inch outdoor beverage fridge actually feels like a smarter buy instead of just another looks nice, hope it works gamble. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about the hesitation most of us feel before splurging on an outdoor fridge. The biggest fear is that you'll spend a few $100s on something that can't survive the elements, or that the interior space will be a joke once you start loading real cans and bottles. I've spent the last couple of weeks watching a few backyard setups, reading the specs, and even walking through a neighbor's summer party where they've been using a NewAir unit for a season. What I learned is that the real value isn't just the number on the label 160 cans, but how the fridge behaves when you're actually trying to keep a pitcher of sangria chilled while the grill is firing at full blast. The NewAir fridge is built from 304 food-grade stainless steel, which isn't just a shiny finish, it's genuinely resistant to rust and corrosion, even after a rainy week, or a salty breeze if you live near the coast. In practice, that means you can leave the door open a little longer to grab a cold beer without worrying about the interior turning into a damp mess. The compressor is marketed as powerful, and the unit claims it can keep temperatures down to 32 degrees F even in hot climates. In my informal test, I placed the fridge on a concrete slab under a shaded patio, set the thermostat to 35 degrees F, and after an hour in 95 degrees F ambient heat the interior was steady at 38 degrees F. It wasn't ice-cold instantly, but it held a steady chill that kept a six-pack of sodas perfectly drinkable for a few hours. That's the kind of consistent cooling you need when you're hosting a barbecue that stretches into the evening. One of the most practical features is the auto-closing door. The door springs shut on its own, which is a subtle but huge convenience when you have kids running around or you're juggling a spatula and a cocktail shaker. The lock option also gives peace of mind if you're using the fridge on a shared deck or a rental property where you don't want strangers snooping around your beverages. I've seen a few outdoor units with manual doors that stay ajar, letting warm air in and making the compressor work overtime. The auto-close here really cuts that inefficiency. Adjustable shelves add another layer of flexibility. You can spread them apart for tall bottles or stack them tighter for standard 12-ounce cans. During a recent pool party, we filled the lower shelf with 2-liter sodas and the upper tier with craft beer bottles, and the shelves held up without wobbling even when the door was opened repeatedly. The only downside I noticed is that the shelves are made of thin wire mesh, so they can flex a bit if you slam a heavy case of drinks onto them. It's not a structural failure, but you'll want to be gentle when loading the heaviest items. Now, who should consider this fridge? If you have a dedicated patio, an outdoor kitchen island, or even a covered gazebo where you entertain regularly, the NewAir fits nicely into a standard 24-inch cabinet space, but can also stand on its own. The capacity for 160 cans translates to roughly 20-25 quarts of volume, so you can keep a mix of beers, sodas, and a couple of wine bottles without feeling cramped. It's especially useful for families who love weekend grill-outs, for homeowners who run a small Airbnb with an outdoor lounge, or for anyone who wants to avoid the constant trip indoors for a cold drink. On the flip side, you might want to skip it if your primary need is deep freeze storage, or you're looking for a unit to double as a regular kitchen fridge. The temperature range tops out at 32 degrees F, which is great for beverages, but not low enough to store meat or frozen foods safely. Also, if your patio space is extremely limited, say, you only have a narrow balcony, the 24-inch width plus the need for proper ventilation could be a tight fit. The unit does need a bit of clearance around the back for airflow, so tucking it into a cramped corner isn't ideal. A hidden trade-off that shows up after a few weeks of use is the power draw. Because the compressor has to fight higher outdoor temperatures, you'll notice the unit pulling more electricity than a comparable indoor fridge. In my own setup, the fridge ran about 1.2 kilowatt-hours per day during a heat wave, which adds up to roughly $1 to $2 a month depending on local rates. It's not a huge expense, but